There we go. Let's start that timer, just so I know that what I need to keep to. So thanks everyone for joining us here. What's up, Jason? Good to see that. Good to see your name. It's been good to catch up with a few folks here at this event. It's such an improvement. I mean, the last event was great, but this one has been such an improvement. So absolute kudos to the Runecast team for putting all of this together. And it's absolutely a pleasure for me to be here to chat at you and hopefully chat with you a little bit later. So yeah, I'm here to talk about ransomware readiness and recovery, which is everyone loves a bit of alliteration in their life. Really, this is an update on what Rubrik are doing in 2021 and kind of in the not too distant future as well. So I don't think there's any super secret reveals today, but there will be some fairly new stuff that some of you might not be aware of. So for those of you who aren't aware of me, my name's Kev Johnson. I'm a technical marketing architect at Rubrik. It's really hard to say that for some reason. And I've been, that's been my job for a long time now, so I should be good at it. I am a firm believer in the term on-premises. This is a hill I will choose to die on, and I have died on it a number of times in the past. But please, on-premises, not on-premise, unless you're talking about a premise. Prior to Rubrik, I was TMM at Runecast and also at VMware as well. So I'm fairly well versed in the technologies in use here today. And prior to that, I was a sysadmin and a certification nerd as well. So I was stuck on that, the constant cycle of I need to get a new cert, and then I need to get a new cert, and there was a little bit of, I probably got burned out a little bit. So I'm looking forward to Trevor Potts' session a little bit later as well. And if you want to hit me up, if you've got any questions after this event, please do feel free to slide into my DMs. I'm at Kev_Johnson on the Twitters. And yeah, my DMs are open. Please don't abuse it anyway. Take advantage of it, but don't abuse it. I don't want any of those kind of photos sending. Thank you very much. So let's talk a little bit about modern data protection and the challenges that we have as sysadmins. So I'm just going to kind of rush through these slides because I've got quite a lot of content to get through, and I'm hoping we're going to get some really good questions at the end. I always really enjoy getting involved in the discussions at the end. So I'm not going to read all of these slides out, but the challenges that we see are many. Managing backup is time consuming, it's painful. Nobody really wants to do it apart from that guy who's just been changing tapes for the last 30 years. And, he's going to be retiring soon. So, these are the challenges. So in this modern world, a lot of organizations, they don't have a dedicated backup team anymore. So they have a team that understands everything that goes on at a very high level, and they might have some specialization in certain areas, but data protection is often not one of them. So one of the things that we really bring to market here is simplicity. The challenge of unstructured data, and this is the stuff that's growing out of control, is it's really, really difficult to index. It's really difficult to manage the life cycle of it. So, having visibility of where it is, who's got access to it, these are all challenges, not only from a data protection perspective, but also from a compliance perspective in a modern organization. As new applications get rolled out, unless there's something that's really, really built in around the way you deploy your applications, you're often going to find that applications get pushed out there. They're not protected, they're not backed up or anything like that. So it's going to be a challenge. And finally, the success of recovery, unless you're regularly checking your backups, testing them, making sure you can restore from them, they're actually completely useless to you. So two things here: we can validate the what's going on. But the other thing that we can do is we can help you to leverage that backup data to deliver extra value to your business. And we can show you how that can help you protect against things like ransomware. So in a traditional backup architecture, what we see here is we've got some production servers. We then back up through a backup proxy to a backup server. There's a catalog typically, and then we drop that off to disk. We then might do a disk to disk to tape type backup, so we have something offline. Now, for all of this stuff, those backups are online. And if they're online, they're a key target when you get ransomware. So what we see happen is your production servers get hit, which means that your backup servers get hit as well. So all of those are now unrecoverable. We've got problems there. We now have our disk-based backup target also connected to the network. If it's using standard protocols, then it could be attacked as well. So we've got problems there. And finally, your SAN is now just full of encrypted garbage. It's useless to you. So you've got no way to recover from that kind of event. With Rubrik, we have this zero trust architecture, which keeps everything offline. So there's no way to get to the actual backup data without going through our APIs, without going through essentially the core of what we do. So we have no storage online. You can't just access an SMB share or an NFS mount. Nothing's there on the network. The backup files cannot be encrypted or modified because you can't get to them. And even if you could, they're stored in an immutable format, which means that they cannot be edited once created. And finally, we can wrap up stuff like multi-factor authentication, time-based one-time passwords, certs-based authentication, TLS 1.2 for data on the wire, all of this good stuff, which means that now, in the event of a major attack, we still see those production servers hit, we still see the SAN gets whacked, but you can still recover from the Rubrik appliance. And I've been amazed since I joined the company 3 months ago to see how many of our customers have been hit by these kind of things. Often, actually, they've only just bought Rubrik, so they've only just got the backups on there, and they can use them to recover from a ransomware attack very, very quickly. So the key principles of data protection, we have 3 really. So we have the concept of an air gap, we have the concept of immutability, and this zero trust model. So zero trust is it's a super cool idea, and a lot of organizations will say, oh, we have zero trust. But, for instance, maybe we have stuff in there that says, okay, well, we verify when we make the connection to that application server, but we're not verifying every single time we connect to that application server because that might be computationally expensive. Rubrik says, actually, never trust, always verify. So we have that capability there. We have that logical air gap. So you cannot get to our backups without, you can't get to the backups without going through Rubrik. So we have that air gap there. We can also do a physical air gap. So if you're one of those organizations, and we do have some customers that do this, whereby you need to have stuff physically disconnected, we can do that also. It's a bit of extra work, and it's not really necessary for absolutely everybody. But yeah, that's the space that we operate in. So we have that logical air gap. We've got the immutable backup storage, so the file system cannot be edited, and that zero trust framework. Excuse me. So if we start looking at how this all plugs together, so Rubrik is a hard and fully integrated appliance. So this is available as hardware. It's also available as a software appliance, so you can deploy what we call cloud cluster into the various different public clouds there as well. On top of that, we build our immutable file system, which we call Atlas. I don't know if I'm actually allowed to say that anymore, so just forget about that. But we also have that end-to-end encryption, the zero trust design. We layer on top of that multi-factor authentication. So if you're in a situation, if you have SAML 2.0 available, we can absolutely leverage that for multi-factor authentication. So if you're using stuff in the cloud, you can use that same identity provider. Even if you don't have that, we can provide time-based one-time passwords so that when you come to log in, you just need something like your mobile phone and you're able to log in there. So it helps to protect against those brute force attacks. And finally, we have retention lock. So retention lock is, it's a capability that's there. We can turn that on our backups. And when that's done, you can't reduce the life cycle of those backups anymore. You can always increase it, but you cannot say, okay, well, these backups that are 2 years old, I only want to keep them for, I don't know, maybe a day. That then expires that data, and you've potentially lost all of that, all of those backups, all of those recovery points. It's a good time to take a quick break. So we need to talk about security. Everyone's terrified of these scary hackers that are wearing I don't know what this picture is actually showing, but yeah, it's a little bit creepy. Anywho, so damages from cybercrime are expected to hit $6 trillion this year. This is 2021. That's a phenomenal amount of money, and I've got some other facts that will help put that in context in the next couple of slides. Not only that's this year, by 2025, it's expected to hit $10.25 trillion, which is, once you start talking in terms of trillions, everything kind of goes out the window. Nobody really knows what's going on anymore. I couldn't tell you what I imagine that amount of money would look like, for example. So to put some perspective on this, as of this year, so that's $6 trillion, that would make it the third largest GDP globally. So after the US and China. So that's a massive economy that's just basically been lost to ransomware attacks and the like. It would be 50% higher than the global impact of COVID-19 last year. So again, that's had a massive global impact. Ransomware is looking at even higher than that. It's growing 15% year on year. So this problem is not going away. I remember a number of years ago, back when I was a consultant, looking at these products that were concerned about ransomware. I was like, the problem's going to go away because people are just going to figure out that they need to keep their backups offline. And yet the problem is growing. And it's exponentially greater than the damage inflicted by all natural disasters in a 12-month period. That was from 2017, that figure. It was something like 365 billion. Then you start looking at figures like 6 trillion. It's insane. And finally, probably the most interesting one for me is that it's more profitable than the entire global trade in illegal drugs. So if you're looking at changing your career, Mr. Drug Dealer, maybe ransomware is where you need to be looking. This is not career advice. So some figures. So this website here, blackfog.com, State of Ransomware in 2021, they update every month with all of the publicly disclosed ransomware details. So here we can just see that typically the government organizations and education, they tend to be the ones that get hit the most, but nobody's immune essentially. And if we look at where they're targeted globally, 50% of them are hitting the United States. Now, that could be for any number of reasons, but it's these are the facts for September. They have these every month. They generate these stats. And finally, we can see that we have this general increase. If we look at September, it's quite interesting because we actually see a decrease. And that decrease is likely to be down to the fact that a bunch of stuff hasn't yet become public. So this is what happens when you kind of fly by the seat of your pants and you have the statistics available by the end of the month. So we may well see that number go up as yet. I'm not expecting to see any drop off at this stage. Let's put it that way. So we would urge you not to pay the ransom. Don't negotiate with terrorists. Don't engage with criminals. You just need a way to help protect yourself against these kinds of things. So today's threat, what we see is typically, you have that ransomware attack, it locks down your data, you get that ransom note, and you log onto your server and you can see, you must pay us some Bitcoin. So you have a ruffle around in your back pockets. You've got no Bitcoin there. So you need to see, well, if we're going to pay this ransom, we need to get our hands on some cryptocurrency. Are you going to pay that ransom? Are you going to attempt to recover? So if we look at, let's look at an example like Colonial Pipeline in America. These were a really good example. Those folks, they had cyber insurance and they paid the ransom. And then what they discovered was, okay, this is super awkward. The decryptor tool that the criminals had provided was too slow. They were never going to be able to recover their business in time. Thankfully, they had, they had a good backup product and they were able to recover that data much quicker. So typically in this kind of model, if you're going to attempt to recover, you're going to have a separate IT ops and a security ops team. They're going to look at restoring backup data, but you don't know when you were compromised. So you might potentially have to restore a number of different backup points. The forensics team are going to look into, how did this get in? How do we make sure we've killed it before we restore all of this stuff? Ultimately, you've probably got compromised backups. So your backups are compromised, you have no option, you pay the ransom or pretty much go out of business. If we look at taking the other route, what we can do is we can then safeguard those backups. We can look at what we need to recover, because chances are you don't need to recover everything. Unless you've been very unlucky, it's not like this is an entire scorched earth cratering the ground. But you need to identify what's gone on. If you need to recover everything, how long is that going to take? Is it going to take you weeks? Is it going to take you months? Chances are you might have to pay the ransom anyway. So with the Rubrik approach, we have this native immutability. We've got the scoped anomaly detection. So these are the new tools that I kind of alluded to earlier. I'll show you some demos of these. So our scoped anomaly detection uses artificial intelligence, uses machine learning to identify when suspicious stuff has happened, so that you can see very, very quickly it's happened and where you need to roll back to. we've got a sensitive data assessment, which is what we call sonar at the moment. And this can be really helpful when recovering data, but it can also be super, super helpful for things like compliance. If you need to identify where you've got potentially personally identifiable information, again, that one's really difficult to say. We can show you where this is. We can show you who's got access to it, so you can help lock that data down even better. And then finally, we've got integrations with tools like Palo Alto Networks, Cortex XOR, which can help you to have a guided recovery experience. So this is what it looks like. You attempt to recover. You engage your security ops and your IT ops teams together. They work together. And because of that cross-team collaboration, we can see, okay, yes, we have got backups that are safeguarded because they're kept offline. They're in an immutable format. We can now scope exactly what's been compromised, how bad, what the damage is. We can discover where our sensitive data is, and we can recover quickly. And speed, time is of the essence when these things happen. So I mentioned Radar. Let me just check how I'm doing for time. Yeah, we're okay. So I mentioned Radar. Radar is our anomalous events detection. There's got to be something better we can come up with in terms of that. But really, what we use this for is to identify where you have ransomware in your environment. Now, we're not running agents on your servers. All of this is done on the Rubrik appliance. So we can basically look at your backup sets and we can say, okay, well, we know what's changed between these 2 points in time. And that looks suspicious to me. We can then identify, exactly when that happened. We can then use tools like Cortex XOR to really help with our incident response. So let's take a look at what that looks like. So here's our global dashboard. We can see here we've got one anomaly event in Radar there. So let's open Radar up and take a look. We all love cool graphs, so we can click around all of this all we like. We can identify, we've got 16,400 suspicious files here. Let's have a look at the anomaly event. All of it seems to be based on this VMware virtual machine. So here's we have high confidence that something bad is happening. So we can see here, for example, let's just roll back. We have 4,300 files have been created and the same number have been deleted. And this is fairly typical in a ransomware attack. So if we click Investigate Snapshot, that takes us in there and we can see what's going on. So here we can see the stuff is happening on the C drive in the file shares directory. So again, probably not too suspicious. Here we go. Let's have a look in HR because everyone loves, everyone wants to know what people are getting paid. So we can see here we've had these files created with a .encrypted extension. And again, this is fairly typical. Most encrypted files will have a customized extension. Excuse me. So we flag these as suspicious. The previously existing files are deleted, so we might just want to recover those back. So we can just go, okay, these are the ones that have been deleted. We can recover a full snapshot. So if we want to recover that entire file server back, we absolutely can. But in this case, we only need to recover the files that are affected. Because we want to do this as quickly as possible. So now we have the options to download, which will allow us to download them from the Rubrik appliance. We can restore them in place, or we can restore them to a separate location. This is typically used if you have a clean room and you're basically going, okay, well, all of this is considered dirty. We need to be able to restore it to a clean environment. In this case, we're just going to generate some download links to download these files. Excuse me. So we can see here, yep, we've got a new activity in Radar there, and it's just preparing a download link. So we can click here and we can now download these files directly from the Rubrik appliance to our desktop. So that's Radar. It's a pretty simple idea. There's some really cool science behind it in terms of the the actual data, how we're identifying this suspicious activity, and that's constantly being tweaked. But the next thing we want to look at is how we can see where we have sensitive data and who's got access to it. So this is what Sonar does. And again, you access it using our Polaris global dashboard. So we can see here in Sonar, we have 243,800 files in there, an increase of 3,400 on the previous scan. So again, let's go in there and open Sonar, and we can take a look at what's going on there. So we can see we have a number of files that are available. We also have these policies and analyzers down in the right-hand corner. And a policy is basically a collection of analyzers. And what we'll do is I'll show you how to set those up in a moment. But these are the ways that we identify what that data is. So if you can write a regex, you can build your own analyzers to check for whatever data type you need. So here we can go, if we go into the C drive, we can see that's where our hits are. 195,000 sensitive data. 11,700 fall under US financials, CCPA, USPII, PCI DSS, all of this stuff. So you can build out these things, you can generate a CSV file, and you can hand that to your auditors if that's what you want to do, or you might want to actually go and do something about it. We can also see who's got access to these locations. So for example, we can see, again, we have all of that data, who's got access to that, because you might want to lock these things down a little harder. Now, if we look in the C drive on this virtual machine, we can see that Jeff appears to have been up to no good. We also see we have files that are listed open access, which means everyone's got full access to them. But if we go into Jeff's downloads directory, we can see we've got a whole bunch of different folders. And it looks like each one of these files has got a bunch of US financial data in there. So we click on that. There we go. We can see the various different hits that we've got there. So that's not good. It's not looking good for Jeff. Now, from a management perspective, this is where we build our analyzers and our policies. So these are the different policies. We can see we've got a custom one there that my Canadian colleague Mike built, scanning for Ontario OENs. I have no idea what an OEN is, but again, we can build these. We can build these for you. So here are the analyzers, and these are basically the ways that we identify that data. So let's create one. So I actually created this video for VMworld a few weeks ago. So there are actually a lot more analyzers available out of the box. If you know regex is, I do not, then you'll be able to build those pretty quickly. And then we can build policies. So let's build a policy comprising of a number of analyzers. Here we'll go with the Ontario OENs. Again, not sure what that is. US bank account numbers, maybe UK driving license numbers, and US-UK passport numbers. Click next, and we've now got this custom policy, and we can check our data against this custom policy. When we can identify any of these in any of the files in those virtual machines, in those NAS mounts, then we can show you what, who's got access and where you might want to log these things down. So again, you can see how this might be super useful when it comes to talking about compliance. So how are we doing for time? I might have to get a wiggle on here. What's new for VMware? So CDP is not a new thing. Rubrik's had it for a while. We've put in some changes, really, some improvements. But first, let's show you what that is. So with a traditional data protection system, you take a backup, and then you take a backup, and then you take a backup, and then you take a backup. And this is all good. And then if anything goes wrong, you can roll back to one of those backups. So much like this. So you have a backup and a backup and a backup, and then, oh, something's on fire. So when that happens, we need a recovery point. So our recovery point in this case is back here, which means we potentially lose all of this data here. So that's not good necessarily. Some workloads might be great with that. With CDP systems, what we do is we take a continuous stream of data protection points. So when that happens, we're going to lose significantly less data. So here's our data stream. And in a moment, we're going to hit that roadblock. We're going to have a problem. Great stuff. OK, so now that we have that, where's that going? We only lose a very, very tiny amount of data. It could be just a few seconds worth of data. So, for those workloads, this can be super important. There we go. I thought my clicker was broken for a moment there. So this is a fairly typical VMware environment. This technology is only available for VMware at present. The virtual machine runs on a host. It's hooked up to production storage. This is all cool. We then use VMware's vSphere APIs for I/O filtering. We inject the filter that we built into that ESXi host. And now what happens is we have a mirror of all I/O traffic. So we have I/O that goes to the production storage. We then have a copy of it which goes to the Rubrik CDP cache, which runs on the Rubrik appliance. And as of right now, in version 6 of Rubrik, we can keep up to 24 hours of data on the appliance there. That's on top of the regular policy-based SLA domains. We also, excuse me, I spotted in Duncan's session, he was talking about stretch clustering, so vSAN stretch clustering, metro storage clustering. This is a thing we see probably more in Europe than in the US, but it's definitely got its place. So organizations where they will have 2 data centers, they're managed by a single vCenter server. It's seen by vSphere as a single logical cluster. And so we have this layer of stretched storage underneath it. We've got stretched networking, everything's stretched. And so what we do here is we have a single Rubrik appliance in each data center. And then when something bad happens, like you lose a data center, that's a pretty bad situation, right? Because this is just a vSphere cluster, vSphere HA will restart those virtual machines in the secondary site. So this is all good. The challenge typically with a legacy backup system is all of your backups are still on your production site. So if you want to start then protecting those virtual machines on your secondary site, you've got a whole bunch of new backup chains that you need to protect. So with Rubrik, because as you can probably see up at the top here, we have replication. So we replicate all of that data back and forth. Now, only the first backup by Rubrik is a full backup. Everything else is a forever incremental. So those backup, the actual deltas can be very, very small. So because we have all of that data, we know that those virtual machines have restarted in the secondary site. We just reprotect them on that secondary Rubrik. And then when something good happens, like, for example, that primary site comes back, all that happens is we have all of those changes get replicated back onto the primary site, and then we can use vMotion to shift those workloads back where they belong. So that's something pretty cool for metro storage clustering, also for vSAN stretch clusters as well. And then, yeah, we protect those virtual machines there. We also added in-place VM recovery. So this is leveraging change block tracking, which is, again, it's a VMware technology. So as you're probably aware, a virtual disk it's a virtual block device. Over time, those blocks get written. And then in the case that we just want to roll back to a specific point in time, hopefully you can make these out on that. I need to change this slide a little bit and make the red a little bit more red, because it means that the backup chains are still valid. You don't need new backup chains. Any automation that you're leveraging that's aware of that virtual machine's ID continues to work. Excuse me, just checking. Oh, crikey. In terms of VMware Cloud Solutions, 5.3.2, we introduced support for the Azure VMware solution. So that was a few months after that. So that's around about a year ago at this point. And also at the same time, we introduced support for Google Cloud VMware Engine. These things don't trip off the tongue easily. If you are a VMware Cloud Director, so again, Duncan was he was chatting about the VCPP program. I know there's many VCPP providers out there, and the good folks at Runecast have been working really hard on their VCD support. So if you are one of those service providers, maybe you want to provide backup as a service to your customers, to your tenants, you can leverage Rubrik. You can provide policy-based backup protection at either the VCD, the tenancy, the vApp, the virtual machine, and the file level. So you can go from, this is the backup policy that you have for everything, to this is the backup policy that you apply to this specific file. So you can be very, very granular. You can then either manage that yourself, or you can provide access to the tenant through the tenant self-service plugin. So you've got full multi-tenancy there of your backup product as well as everything else. In terms of data management, so it wouldn't be a technology event without somebody saying Kubernetes. So everybody take a drink. There we go. So yeah, we have that. Let me just skip back. I didn't mean to jump there. So Kubernetes, if you're providing, if you need to be able to back up your cluster config, if you need to back up your persistent volumes, all of this stuff, you need to protect that data, because the idea that everything in Kubernetes can just be thrown away is, it's not necessarily the case. So again, this is something that's going to be coming out in the next few weeks, I believe. So we've been working on this for quite some time. Expect to see it any day soon. And then finally, from from a sysadmin perspective, Microsoft 365 is everywhere. Some of you folks might be aware that Microsoft made a big investment in Rubrik in the not too distant past. So they really believe in what we're doing in terms of protecting data. A lot of organizations think, well, I'm using Office 365 for my email. I don't need to back that stuff up because it's Microsoft's job. And Microsoft are absolutely responsible for the availability of the service, but they are not responsible for protecting that data. So if you have any requirements whereby you might need to be able to get back an email that somebody's deleted, whether that's for legal reasons or you need to be able to prove something, then you need to be having some kind of backup tool. And Rubrik can be deployed in a couple of different models. Either you can manage it yourself through your own Azure subscription, or we have a fully managed Microsoft 365 protection. So we've got protection there for Teams, for SharePoint, for Exchange Online, and OneDrive, and there's a bunch more stuff coming soon as well. So you can start off super, super tiny, and you just pay as you grow, essentially. So if I kind of roll back to the ransomware side of things, what we have is kind of building on top of all of those other tools that I mentioned earlier. AppFlows is kind of like the final piece of the puzzle. So AppFlows sits on top of our CDP offering, and it allows you to replicate workloads from one location to another, so you always have a warm copy in standby if anything goes wrong. We can do full orchestration, so if you need to change IP addresses, if you need to run scripts, all of that stuff can be fully automated. You can test it without taking down your production environment. All of this leveraging what you have now for backups. So it is super cool, and I'll show you a couple of things about how it works shortly. In fact, there we go. So AppFlows in and of itself is a software as a service offering. So we manage it from our Polaris user interface. So this is a website on the internet. You connect it to the Rubrik appliances on either side, and we use, we replicate across there using continuous data protection. This allows us to do sub 1 minute recovery point objectives. So if something goes wrong, you can always bring stuff back online in your second site. So let me just show you how it works. So what we've got here, the first thing we have to do is define a blueprint. And a blueprint is essentially a definition of a bunch of different objects. So virtual machines, networks, storage requirements, all of this different stuff. If it's got multiple virtual machines in, we can also specify, we need them to start up in this order, and we need to wait for services to be available, all of this good stuff. We then do that replication across to our secondary site, so that if something goes bad, all we have to do is power those virtual machines up in our secondary site. And this secondary site could be VMware Cloud on AWS. So yeah, it is pretty cool. And this can be really helpful when you need to recover from ransomware as well. As I mentioned earlier, it leverages our continuous data protection. So we have that constant stream of recovery points. When something goes bad, we only have to roll back a very, very tiny amount, or potentially 6 hours, or depends on what that disaster is. If it's a piece of ransomware that's hit you and you need to be able to roll back to 1 minute before they got into the environment, you can absolutely do that. And then we can do, it's basically 2 clicks to fail over or fail back. So it's super, super simple, because when you're in an environment where things are on fire or there's water coming through your data center, the last thing you need is something that's complicated. You don't want to have to get out a run book and run through a whole bunch of different scripts and commands. And finally, there's compliance reporting as well. So we can show, okay, we're going to do these automated failover checks. So we can guarantee that this is all going to work, and we can generate automated reporting at the end as well. So you can hand it to your business and say, you can have confidence that when something goes wrong, we can get things back up and running very, very quickly. So I mentioned, I kind of alluded to AppFlows to protect against ransomware. So yeah, here we go. We see from here that we have a problem. We then go check into Radar. Radar can then say, okay, well, at exactly this moment in time, we can see that this is where your problems are occurring. We've got 179 servers, 301,000 files impacted. Great. We can use AppFlows to just power up that, just roll that back a very, very, very brief period of time, get back up and running very quickly, and away we go. So it can make things a lot easier when you're recovering from ransomware. And this is how it works. So here we can see this is an AppFlows blueprint, and we can see we've got 1,100 suspicious activities within this blueprint. In this case, this blueprint consists of 2 virtual machines, but there could be many in there. So let's explore in there and let's do a recovery. So here we're doing an in-place recovery because we can get things back up and running very quickly. The first thing we need to do is select the points in time that we're going to roll those objects back to. So here we've got 2 virtual machines, and we can see this first snapshot here. We can't use this because there's anomalous activity detected in there. This is a problem. We don't want to roll back and still have that issue. So we go back to the next one that's available. This is a clean one. We can hit close. We do the same for this other Windows virtual machine. So again, we can identify when the suspicious activity happened and just roll back to the point in time prior to that. And there we are. So what you might not have noticed actually is that these are actually rolling back to different points in time. We could go back to the same point in time, but it may be that one machine was compromised and then half an hour later the other one was. So we can make sure we're losing the least amount of data. Now, this recovery is a disruptive operation. We're going to basically get rid of the existing virtual machines and replace them with the known good copies. So because it's disruptive, we just have this check in here. We ask you to type blueprint and then click recover. And then it's going to kick off that workflow and your virtual machines get recovered. We're almost at the end now. So we have a few different approaches that we can do this with. The latest one we have is what we call mass recovery. So here we can just identify everything that's been impacted by the malware. And we can say, okay, we want to just roll all of these virtual machines back to a known clean snapshot. Or we also have a couple of other options. The next one is virtual machine recovery and non-suspicious file recovery. So we can roll the virtual machines back to the last known good snapshot. But if not everything if not all of the files have been encrypted, maybe we want to actually roll them forward to put to the latest point in time so that we're not losing any data that's useful. We can also choose to use the closest snapshot as well. Finally, I can't believe how quickly I've gone through this. This session took me right to the wire for VMworld. Something that a few of you may have noticed, we've been making a lot of noise on social media about is the Rubrik ransomware recovery warranty. Again, that's really difficult to say. So this is us basically putting our money where our mouth is. And realistically, yeah, there's some T's and C's you need to agree to in order to get this. But first, you need to be a Rubrik customer. The next thing is we're publishing a whole bunch of industry best practices, both for data protection and kind of security hardening. So you need to go by those. We'll then appoint you a customer experience manager who will validate all of this stuff. And then once that's in place, if you get hit by ransomware, we're saying we will pay up to $5 million to guarantee that you recover that data back from that ransomware attack. I've not seen anything else on the market that's really putting their it's a phenomenal guarantee that we're putting out there. But yeah, so that's the ransomware recovery warranty. If you want to learn more about this or anything else, if you can go to rubrik.com. Please feel free to hit me up. As I said, my name is I'm at Kev_Johnson on Twitter, and I'll try and direct you to the relevant people. I'm not a salesperson. I'm not a very good salesperson at the very least. So I'll definitely point you in the right directions. But yeah, that's everything that I've got, and I've got 5 minutes for questions and answers, and I've got one question. So you've got a few minutes to come up with some more. So on that note, thank you very much. I'm just going to say again, if you've got any questions, please hit me up. I'm at Kev_Johnson. TLS 1.2, not 1.3. So it's a really good question. I guess the question there is, not all organizations are in a position where they can, where they're fully, they can do TLS 1.3 for all of their applications. So, bear in mind we're protecting some pretty legacy applications in some situations. So that's why we're at TLS 1.2. I would imagine we'll see 1.3 in the not too distant future with, options for failback. But that's kind of where we are at the moment. Any other questions? Thanks, Raf. Good to see you, man. Oh, crikey. Got a bit of a sweat on. Great. Well, if there's no other questions, I'm happy to wrap up a little early, give you an extra 5 minutes back before the next session. Thanks everyone for coming. I really appreciate it. It's always great. It's great fun to speak to you all. Hopefully, I'll be able to see you at at some kind of events in the not too distant future. What about DBMS integration? So can you elaborate on that one? So we've got integration with Microsoft SQL, integration with Oracle as well, and we're working on some NoSQL stuff as well. So not relational, but database management systems. So yeah, there's plenty of stuff in there. I kind of wanted to, as you probably saw, there was a lot of content to get through. I could have probably talked for about 3 hours about what we had there. Right. So the file analysis. So what we can do is. In fact, probably the best thing to do. Can you hit me up through the messaging on the event? You can send me a message. Let me know a little bit more about what specifically you're looking at. If you're looking for suspicious activity for a specific DBMS, then I can definitely put you in touch with a specialist on that. But yeah. Thanks for coming along, Ryan. It's always a pleasure. Likewise, Brian. And Thomas. It's all these names come flooding back. I think I'm about to get pinged by my phone. Yeah, I've got 2 minutes. Let's cancel that. Thanks, Hoop. And yeah, I mean, please do hit me up. And this isn't me trying to dodge the question. It's me trying to make sure that I get you in touch with somebody who is a database specialist. And I'm kind of more, as you probably saw, virtualization and cloud. But yeah, no, this is all good stuff.